Imagine a village covered in snow during a long, endless night. Men walked silently among the trees, carrying torches and digging tools. Their faces were pale, as if they had seen death with their own eyes. But they hadn't come to bury anyone. They had come to dig up a grave. The grave of a girl who was said not to have died completely, but who still visited the living at night, drinking their blood and letting them wither away to their last breath. This was the beginning of the story that people later came to know as the story of Mercy Brown, the last vampire in New England. The earth lay still that night, as if holding its breath, waiting for what would happen. The snow covered the fields in a cold white color, reflecting the faint moonlight that crept through the heavy clouds. In a small village in Rhode Island, a group of men gathered at the edge of the woods, their faces pale, their eyes gleaming with fear and certainty. The night was thick, and the wind whipped the spindly branches, making sounds like the whispers were as if the earth itself was speaking to them in a language they did not understand. But they paid no attention. They knew what they had come for. They knew they had come neither to farm nor to hunt, but to confront something insurmountable. At the forefront of the crowd stood George Brown, the farmer who had lost his most precious possession. In just 1 year, his wife had died first, then his eldest daughter. Now, every day, he feared that his only son, Edwin, would follow them, slowly wasting away until he was a shadow of a man. The doctors called the disease wasting away or consumption, but the villagers had a harsher name. They said that an evil spirit was rising from its grave to devour the souls of the living, and that a recently deceased family member had not completely left. Instead, he returned at night to visit his loved ones, taking them away one by one. When the news spread among the villagers, they gathered in the old church and spoke in whispers about the curse, about the bodies that did not decompose, and about the blood that remained fresh in the veins of the dead. Finding no other explanation, they decided to do what the neighboring villages had done before them, to open the graves in search of the perpetrator who might not have died. The next morning they went out in a group, accompanied by George Brown, who could no longer bear to see his son breathing heavily every night. He didn't want to believe what was about to happen, but he was broken-hearted and helpless, searching for hope, even in a fairy tale. They walked through the snow-covered trees, each step making a faint creaking sound mixed with the wind, until they reached a small cemetery perched on a hill overlooking the forest. There they stood silently, staring at the ground containing the bodies of the Brown family. One of the men pointed to the 3 graves and said hesitantly, "We have to start here." Then torches were lit and hands slowly began to work. The shovels pounded the frozen ground like they were hitting a stone. With each blow, someone trembled. No one wanted to be the first to see what was inside, but they persisted because fear was no longer an option. It had become a means of survival. Hours passed, sweat mingling with the snow until the edges of the wooden coffins appeared. They opened the first and found the mother's body lay lifeless, with no sign of anything strange. Then they moved to the second, where the eldest daughter had become bones. When they reached the third, Mercy's grave, they all stopped. She was the youngest, having passed away only weeks earlier, but the snow had frozen the ground so that the burial was delayed for days. When they removed the covering, everyone fell silent. The body looked as if it were still asleep. The cheeks retained a pale pink color. The lips were closed, as if they were breathing. When one of them reached out to confirm, he felt a slight heat beneath the skin. He recoiled, screaming, "She's not dead." His words were enough to strike fear into the hearts of all. One whispered that her heart hadn't decayed, that blood was still flowing in her veins. Another swore he saw her lips moving. They waited no longer. They said the only solution was to remove her heart and burn it, and from its ashes they could make medicine for Edwin, hoping the curse would end, and so they did. They set fire to a heart still warm, and its scent mingled with the thick black smoke that rose into the gray sky. At that moment, George Brown stood far away, staring blankly into the flames. He no longer knew whether he had saved his son or lost the last remnants of his soul. As the fire slowly died down, a cold wind blew over the cemetery, as if carrying some of that smoke to every house in the village. From that night on, no one dared pass by after sunset. The days passed slowly, as if time itself hesitated to continue after what had happened in that small cemetery. The once quiet village now carried an incessant whisper. Everyone who passed by the hill lowered their voices and quickened their steps. People no longer spoke of Mercy Brown as a girl who had passed away, but as a being who hadn't quite left. On cold nights, the wind would pass through the trees, making a sound like a sigh. Some swore they heard light footsteps outside near the windows, the footsteps of a barefoot woman walking on the snow without leaving a trace. Someone would wake up to find the door open and the air filling the room with the scent of damp earth. They would search for an explanation, but found nothing but that story, which was no longer a story, but a certainty and hearts gripped by fear. As for George Brown, he became a silent man who spoke to no one. He would sit by his fireplace every night, gazing into the flame in long silence. He would recall images of the faces he had lost one by one. The face of his wife smiling before illness extinguished the light in her eyes. The face of his eldest daughter when she was running into the field. Then Mercy, the little girl who laughed with a voice like the ringing of a bell. Now nothing remains but ashes, the ashes of a heart that was burned, believing it was salvation. Edwin didn't get better, though. His body weakened day by day until he closed his eyes forever. He died just as his sisters had. Of the Brown family, nothing remained but the broken father who had lost everything. Then the legend began to transcend the village. It passed from word to word and from state to state, until it became the talk of the newspapers at the end of the 19th century. At that time, America was changing. Cities were growing, science was advancing, and doctors were talking about a new disease, a disease that slowly ate away at the lungs until the body withered away completely. They called it tuberculosis. But in the remote villages where doctors weren't easily accessible, people continued to believe the disease was nothing more than a sign of a vampire in their midst. Newspapers wrote about it with a mixture of amazement and fear. Articles talked about villagers digging up graves, removing hearts, and burning them, and pictures dot to small churches and snow-covered cemeteries. The story of Mercy Brown became the most famous of all. The girl who, after her death, was accused of being the last vampire in New England. Some writers began to link her story to tales coming from Europe, stories of Count Dracula rising from his grave to feed on human blood. The world lived between two worlds back then, one that believed in science and another still captive to superstition. And Mercy stood between them like a shadow, unsure where she belonged. Many years passed, and everything changed. But her grave remained in the small Exeter cemetery, under an ancient tree that grows older every year and sheds its leaves in the fall, as if reminding passers-by that death is not the end of the story. Sometimes visitors come from far away. They read her name inscribed on the cold stone. They'd place a rose or a coin on top. Then they leave in silence, as if trying to soothe a soul that has never known peace. The nights in Rhode Island are still as cold as ever, and the wind that passes over the cemetery still. There's something of that old whisper in it. People are no longer afraid of vampires as they once were, but something mysterious remains in the place, something that makes the visitor feel as if they are being watched, as if the eyes that Mercy closed more than a century ago are still watching from afar. This story is no longer just a historical incident. It has become a mirror reflecting humanity's eternal fear of the unknown, the fear of death and what comes after it, the fear of losing those we love, and then discovering that we were the cause. And when night returns to cover the white earth, everything seems as it was on that first night. The cemetery is silent, and the snow glistens under the moonlight. And in the depths of the silence, a faint sound of unknown origin echoes in the wind. Perhaps it's the echo of a legend. Perhaps it's the call of a girl who is yet to find peace. Decades passed like long dreams. Cities and people changed and faces changed, but Mercy Brown's name remained in the memory. Each generation heard the story in its own way, and each narrator added a new detail, until the legend became bigger than the truth it began with. In the early 20th century, researchers and doctors came to Rhode Island, carrying their notebooks, cameras, and curious hearts. They spoke of tuberculosis, of contagion, and of people's lack of explanation for what afflicted them. They said that what the villagers did was nothing more than a desperate attempt to understand in a time when science was absent. Yet no one dared to ridicule them. Everyone who read the story honestly felt that there was something deeply human in it, something that transcended myth and touched the very essence of fear itself. The fear of death, the fear of loss, the fear of being alone in a world whose laws we do not know. Even today, the story is told on cold nights when the voices are silent and the world is asleep. People tell it to their children in the light, the dim, as fear mixes with amazement, and the image of the girl who never completely surrendered to death reappears from the shadows of time. They say her grave has become a small shrine visited by those who love mystery or believe that souls are immortal. Some come out of curiosity, some out of faith. But when they stand before her simple stone tombstone, everyone feels the same, a strange stillness resembling peace, as if the land that witnessed fear had finally learned how to be still. On the stone is engraved only her name with no other words, as if she needed nothing more to remain present. Mercy Brown, the name that became a bridge between two eras, between ancient ignorance and new knowledge, between fear and faith, between death and life. Perhaps in that paradox lies the value of the story. It is not about a vampire searching for blood, but rather about a person searching for the meaning of death so that he can be reassured about life. Some nights the wind passes over the old cemetery, stirring the leaves of the trees. The passerby imagines someone calling him from afar, a soft, calm voice, as if emerging from another time. A voice says, "Do not fear the night, for every darkness carries within it the promise of morning." And so Mercy Brown remains, not as a monster from a myth, but as a shadow reminding us that fear itself can create stories, and that when a person faces the unknown, they can create a legend that outlasts their life itself. And when the night ends and the sun rises over that white land, everything returns as it was. The air is still, the trees stand, and a small grave gleams with dew, as if the whole world is saying in a faint silence that stories do not die, they only sleep, waiting to be told again. And so the story ends, as do all the myths created from human fear and loneliness in the face of the unknown. But what remains is not terror, but contemplation. That moment when we realize that every darkness has a meaning, and every story has an echo that remains after everything has calmed down. If you enjoyed this journey through time, give it a longer life with your voice. Leave your mark with a word, and click like if I found in the story a stillness that resembles you. Subscribe to join us in the upcoming stories. Where the world sleeps, stories awaken.